Welcome to Bite Size Dental Marketing. Today I have David Goodman. David's with PKF O'Connor Davies and my personal friend. David, I've had such a wonderful time catching up with you on the pre-show and obviously the last time we talked, but recently I finally got to be in the same physical space as you, and we got to hang out in Vegas at the ADCPA conference. And just for me, as someone who's not in the CPA world, heavily other than, friends and acquaintances, it is so funny to see all these accountants come together and all of them dedicated to the dental space. And it's just so fascinating to see the personalities involved, but mostly you just take away the commitment they have to bettering the dental community and what it means. And just from an outsider, I loved the depth of the conversations of the sessions that the members had. And it was really exciting to see this group of accountants and small business owners and medium-sized business owners come together and better the industry that we all live in. And it was really humbling. From an outsider's view, that was one of the things that Andre and I took away and really enjoyed. But I'd love to hear about what you thought.
First of all, just hearing you talk about your experiences with my colleagues just makes me smile. I would not be who I am and the work that I do with dentists if it wasn't for the ADCPA. And it was so fortunate for me to find this group. It was the summer of 2001, and I was breaking in a new staff accountant in the office of a dentist. So the staff accountant was sitting at a conference table in the dentist's office. I was sitting at the desk, and he had dental economics on the desk. And I opened up the first page of dental economics, and there was a request from Rick Williford asking if there was anybody out there who worked with dentists as a CPA to please call him. And Rick was based out of Atlanta. I gave Rick a call and I said, I work with dentists. And he said, okay, you're in. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, we don't know, but we're going to be meeting at the PVSG in October, and we're going to try and figure something out because I've spoken to a couple of other people before. And I said, great. Unfortunately, being from the New York metro area, September 2001 was not the best time to be flying. And so I had to miss that first meeting. But Rick called me back after the meeting, and he said, if you don't come to Minneapolis in May of 2002, you're not in. And I said, I'm coming. So I went out there to meet some of the most brilliant, passionate, friendly, outgoing, trusting people you could ever meet. And from that experience, I've tried to make as many ADCPA meetings as I could possibly go to. The entire room is filled with people that are just passionate in helping dentists. We know that dentists don't get this business education when they're so engrossed in their dental skills and their dental education. And we feel it's up to us to help them to be successful, because they deserve to be, after going through the training that they've gone through, and to be providing healthcare for people, that if they have some sort of income and quality of life, that they are entitled to it, and we want to help them get there. So we get together twice a year at various locations where firms are located to host. Although this last meeting was in Las Vegas, which would have been a lot more fun than Salem, Oregon, where the firm that was hosting us would have had us. So, and it was great to see you. We just passed each other, and you were, heading away from the hotel, and I was heading in, and I stopped you and said, hey, I know who that is. Mm-hmm. So, thanks for having me back from the last time. But I will tell you that the ADCPA meeting in Vegas was really a good time. The topics were excellent, and we learned a lot about not only different perspectives on tax implications and changes that could help our clients, but also about different approaches to practice management and some of the bigger issues that are happening in the dental profession today.
Yeah, I was reading or listening to a podcast, I guess, and it was talking about how dental practitioners are one of the last bastion of true entrepreneurs out there in the space, and just talking about the challenges they face in today's world. And we have Robert Edwards and Lynn Ledbetter, down here that we're good friends with, and Jess up in Fluent, in Portland, or not Portland, but close to there. And it's just so wonderful that, to me, I don't want to oversimplify, but it's like marketing. I mean, anyone can do marketing. It's anyone can do social media. Anyone can write content and put it on a website. And I assume anyone can, balance a chart of accounts and put together tax preparations. But to really understand, for us, when someone says all on fours, when someone talks about the cost per acquisition of new patients and the benchmarking that comes along with it, like the fact that our whole team understands those concepts, I'm sure plays similarly in the CPA world around, in the tax preps and all of the challenges that you face in just maintaining good books and accounting records and tax preparation and, tax strategies. Like I said, it really was humbling to listen to the depth of conversation and the presentations that were being had. And you could just see the love of everyone's craft there. And it was really cool to see.
No, thanks. Well, I think that, anybody can, make debits and credits balance, and, anybody can put out an advertisement out there. The thing is that I always say you need to work with somebody professionally who understands your business. So you don't want to work with a marketing person if you're a dentist who specializes in junkyards. It's just not going to be a good
Not the
fit,
same.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you're right. Now, marketing's marketing,
Yeah.
but it's not the same.
Yeah. And so you have to be good at what you do, and you have to be, what I refer to for me is being client centric. Everything is always about helping the client. If it's good for the client, let's do it. And what we're seeing now is it's not about the debits and credits. And if you look at studies, they say that accounting is probably the first profession that AI is going to eliminate.
Really?
Yeah. And
shocking.
Not to me. If you're familiar with how the blockchain all works now, it's like the government can get any information through the blockchain it wants, and you can protect anything that you don't want the government to get access to. But AI is going to eliminate a lot of this. We see it already in some of the bookkeeping that we do, but because you just download the transactions, the software knows, based on the vendor's name or where a previous transaction went to, where to categorize it. And then what we're able to do with CPAs is many of us have a standard list or chart of accounts of the profit and loss expenses. And we're able to look and know what percentage that should be of collections. And if there's something that's out of line, it doesn't make sense, too low or too high, there's a pretty good chance that something's not properly recorded, and so we can manage then by exception. Eventually, AI will be able to do that as well, and move the transactions around. So, in the old days, the CPAs would go in and say, your supply cost should be 6 to 8% of your collections, and your lab should be 7 to 8% of your collections, and your salary and wages should be 25% of your collection. And that's getting old. That's really not necessarily the best place that you might be able to help a dentist. And so some of the things that we talked about at the ADCPA meeting is how to use new technology, and what technology is available out there. So there's a new software that we're going to be adopting here at my firm that's going to help us to prepare the statistical data that we use in helping our dentists. One of the things that we look at are fee schedule. That's where you can really help a dentist, is understanding maybe how much they're getting reimbursed from an insurance company and how that's hurting their bottom line. And that's where the entrepreneurial part of what you talked about comes in, because dentists still have that flexibility, unlike doctors, and that what makes working with dentists so exciting and so different than other medical professionals. The other thing is that dental practices use two separate record keeping software. They use one for their income and expenses, but they use another that tracks all the procedures that they do in the office, their patients, their charts, all of this information, all of this data is all collected there, and it can be extracted, and it can be used to interpret what's happening in the practice from a completely different perspective. not to say that the financial information and the practice management software um, the, correlate with each other. They do, but nobody really takes a look at the practice management software. And I think that's really the future, not only of the CPA profession and working with dentists, but I think almost in every industry, is that there's going to be a lot more data analysis in the future.
I think before I owned a business, and before we reached sizable enough that we needed a team, back when we were smaller, I mean, just to be candid, I did my own, uploaded them in QuickBooks, filed them myself. It took me an hour, and our taxes were relatively easy. But as my agency and our agency has grown in sophistication and now employing people across different time zones in cities and countries, in fact, as we run pilots, it has raised the bar of what we need. And you hit on something that was true to me there. So now we have a bookkeeper, we have a traditional CPA, we have a tax attorney, and we've had to build this team around the needs of our agency to stay true. But the real value they provide me is, I expect when someone says, "Oh, you have a CPA," well, of course we do. But I think when I heard that before I had this sort of journey that I've gone on, I thought a CPA did that. I thought they balanced books and filed my taxes. But the richness that the team has brought me is so much more around just the comfort that I'm making good decisions, that this is what we see other agencies in the trends they're seeing in staffing. And this is, sort of, you're following this trend as well. And, we get into this billable hour rate and how that's a really difficult cycle to break out of. And our team has evolved from, when I envisioned it and someone said, "Do you have a CPA?" I thought, again, go back several years. I didn't really know what that meant. But to me, and as you were talking, the value is not necessarily in the chart of accounts and, understanding GAAP. It's in the business coaching that comes along with having a really great team that knows your business. And I don't know that I would be as successful. Well, in fact, I do know I would not be as successful as we are today if we did not have a financial team that really understood my business and how to categorize the different revenues, how to really get into, when we try to break into a new region, and the cost per acquisition of acquiring an office, and, even down to the simple things of putting my kids on the payroll for their college funds in Roth IRAs. And it has brought such a comfort to me as a human being that I get to work with people that really understand my business and can help me make good decisions. And I think there's some education that the CPA world has to do on the services you guys provide, because it's so much more than I thought it was, before we grew.
Yeah, I mean, CPAs hold themselves as accountants and advisors. People see us, or at least the profession tells us that the business world sees us as the most trusted professionals that they work with, and we still, I believe, rank at the top.
We see that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the question is, what does that mean? How does that translate into real life? How does that actually become something that you can perceive as being tangible? And it's the ability for us to learn, in my case, all about dentistry, all about dental practices, to be able to talk to a doctor in their language, in dentist English. And I love when I'm talking to a doctor and we're talking about teeth. That's what they talk about. And I'll point out to them that I had double root canal in 9 and 10, and they're like, "What? Do you even know that teeth are numbered?" I mean, they're so excited to be talking to somebody that doesn't put fingers in mouths, but yet understands them, and that's so important. But it's taking that understanding and then applying it to financial principles to get them to where they want to be. I'm not saying that every dentist has to be extremely wealthy, belong to 3 country clubs, have houses all over the world, but they have to be in a place where they feel comfortable. And a lot of them are not getting there, and they don't understand why. And it's because they need to be working with somebody that understands what they're going through. I always say, start with a dentist who is working in a very small space, the mouth. It's dark in there, and they're hunched over, and they have the greatest fear of not wanting to hurt you. That's all they don't want to hurt you. And it's got to be extremely stressful for them all day long to be like that. And so they need to be able to not take that stress out of the operatory and be able to say, okay, I did my thing. This is what I was trained to do. I loved it. I had fun in there, but I can feel good that there's food on the table. There's a roof over my head. There's a car in my driveway. My kids are going to school, whatever it might be. It's really powerful for me to be able to allow those things to happen for the dental clients that I work with, for anybody that I work with for that matter, but specifically the dentist, because I know that they don't know and don't have the time to really learn all of the things that I just bring to them.
And it is fascinating that as a dentist gets more busy, they prioritize their time on productive work or cash generating work. And then they have less time to operate this oftentimes increasingly complex organization that they're building to handle the higher production. And I think that's where, at least when I think of my own journey, it's been really powerful to have that style of advisor and coach. I mean, I would say coach is.
We talked a lot about that, I think, in our first podcast that we did together, about team and the importance of your team. When should I be bringing in another associate? And it's not about, well, I feel like I'm busy or my schedule looks like it's busy. Actually, the numbers can tell you that story. And, I'm assuming that working with somebody that specializes in marketing companies also knows when it's time for you to start to branch out, because you can't be the chief cook and bottle washer all at the same time. You're going to need people to help you do business development or to help you to develop the campaign, do the copywriting. And eventually, you're overwhelmed, but there are, I'm sure, financial signals along the way that tell you when it's time to do that.
Yeah. Speaking of financial signals, I'm going to pivot us a little bit. We're halfway through 2024, sitting right about the middle of the year. What have you seen this year in the numbers? And by the way, I still have such a crush on you for publishing the report you do that has the breakdown. I've sent it to my entire team to read. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, but it's so fascinating to me of how you compile that data and put those reports together. But what are you seeing in the first half of 2024?
What I'm seeing is I'm not getting a lot of phone calls from clients, and that should be a good thing. So, usually they call me when things are not going well. Their schedules are empty. But I'm getting interesting calls right now. So, and I'll get into answering all of that as that you just asked about information. But I'm getting a lot of calls right now about EBITDA. What is that? What is mine? I'm talking to some DSO or some other practice that wants to acquire me. What does all of that mean? And it seems to have slowed down in some areas, but I think it never really got a lot of traction where I am in the New York metro area. So it's becoming a little bit more common now. Thank goodness for the ADCPA and my colleagues who have experienced that type of situation where there are a lot of practices looking for the acquisitions, that I've already talked with them about this, and talk about the situations that they face to be able to now help my clients here in the Northeast. But practices seem to be doing well. Doctors are up slightly right now. We're looking at collections probably. We're seeing like 5% right now through the end of May, and hoping that this will be a continuing trend through the rest of the year. We're still finding that hygienists and assistants are hard to find, but they are out there. There seems to be a leveling of the playing field in that area. Things are started. Hygienists and assistants are slowly not switching jobs as fast, and they're starting to stay in place. And so the labor market is still a challenge, but it
Mm.
seems to be working right now, whether it be that a practice now has just multiple hygienists who are all working, part-time, or if they found somebody that they really love and they stuck. Um, Labor costs are up slightly, not significantly right now. And I think that that aspect of practices and the challenges facing there, I think, are probably starting to slow down, and practices are stabilizing a little bit more. I think that the insurance is becoming a bigger issue for practices, and I think a lot of doctors are coming to the realization that they're losing a lot of money by participating with insurance companies.
Mhm.
And what we're doing is talking to our clients who are complaining about the reimbursements that they're getting from insurance companies, and they are looking to start dropping insurance companies. So we start to talk to them about how far their schedule is filled and booked out, how far their hygiene schedule is filled and booked out. Um, what they're paying their hygienist to make sure that they have profitable days every day, which means sometimes that they can't see patients from a certain insurance company because it just makes the day not profitable. And starting to explore how they start to talk to their patients about insurances that they're no longer going to be participating with. Always optimistic, and very optimistic right now in what's happening in the dental profession with my clients.
Now, when you say you're up about 5%, I think you said, would you consider that to be sort of a combination of some rate, rate changes, some dropping of insurance? Because I don't know where we stand right now as far as inflation goes, but it does feel like we're still in somewhat of an inflationary economy. What do you think is contributing to that 5% increase in collections?
It's a really good question. I've seen some doctors go up more than 5%. And I've asked them, what do you do differently right now? And what I'm hearing is that patients who have had dentistry sitting in the chart, they've had case presentations and just not have accepted them at this point, are all of a sudden started to come around. The trend started back in November, December, and it seems to have been carrying over into January, February, March right now, where we've seen patients ready to accept treatment. Can't tell you why it's happening, but it is. So maybe people feel that the economy is stabilized, or that maybe their compensation is catching up with the changes in inflation. But they're coming out. So that's one area where we're seeing it. Fee increases is another. We always recommend that our clients increase their fee for service fees every single year. And we have been recommending for fee increases for 2024 to be somewhere between 3 and 5%. So that could also be a reason why, if they listened to me and did increase their fees. Now, we know that there are practices that have a significant insurance portion, but PPOs in many cases are required to pay out at a certain percentile for your zip code. And if all of the practices participating with that insurance company are increasing their fees, that percentile increases. And so some of the insurance companies have to, under the PPO contract, pass on fee increases, or reimbursement increases, I should say, to their practices. And so we're seeing some of that as well. There has been some aggressive moves by some of the insurance companies in my area to align themselves with large employers or large organizations associated with employers. New Jersey is very well known for the pharmaceutical companies, a lot of manufacturing here. And so the dental insurance companies are aligning themselves with these organizations to get patients to sign on for the insurance, and then hopefully be new participants in practices that are accepting insurance. Doctors who are accepting insurance are working harder to get to where they need to be. And I think there's a fear that dentists might not be able to reach their production or collection goals because of the insurances. And it's our goal to help them understand the impacts and see what would happen if they drop insurance. Now, you could have a practice that's 60% with one particular insurance company, I'm not going to go into a practice and tell you, okay, 60% of your patients are going to leave if we drop this insurance. It doesn't make sense. So we start with the smaller ones to see what happens. Dentists who have a better relationship with their patients, who explain insurance to them better than other doctors, seem to be retaining a higher level of patients. In our experience, when we've eliminated insurance companies from a practice, we never see more than about 20 to 30% of the patients with that insurance company actually leave the practice.
That aligns very elegantly with what we see as well. I will say of the 115 or so practices that we run, and in fact, I'm going to lead with the headline, so to speak. In all of our years of helping practices move toward fee-for-service, we're aspiring to fee-for-service, we've had one practice that did not like it. And I mean, it has been so it's under 1% failure for sure. I think you articulated it very well in that we start with a small one, get the muscle memory, get the team talking about it. And there's things we can do. I mean, from not just payment plans, but in-house membership plans that help alleviate some of the cost and learning how to talk to that. I mean, we see somewhere around 15 to 20% at the most leave. But the truth of the matter is, David, they are not the patients who are accepting treatment anyway. They're coming in for their 2 cleanings and maybe a filling if you really put them under duress. But they're not your best patients. They're your patients who are already so cost sensitive about everything. Yeah. And so it's 15% of your patient base, but not 15% of your real collections.
True. And depending on where your fees are at, I have one client that has an insurance company paying her 50% of her fee for service fee. I told her she could lose half of the patients that are participating with that insurance, and she would still be breaking even. And I said, and think about how less stressful it would be for you to not have to see all of those patients and still make the same amount of money. And I said, and if you wanted to allow yourself to bring in new patients faster who are either fee for service or not participating with the insurance company that you now drop, you increase your revenue even more and you get paid fairly for the services that you're providing. One of the things I know dentists forget is that they're providing oral health care, and they lose sight of that. And they're medical professionals, I believe, just as much as.
Very well said. Very well said. I would imagine, at least self-reported, and I see it. The scariest thing they do is have to drop those insurance programs. But in reality, there are guys like yourself. There are agencies like ours. There are coaches. There is a whole sub industry built around the graceful exit of insurance in a practice. And it's almost down to a science in how it can be executed. And I've heard of one. They were not part of our group, but I've heard of one dentist that got out of network and said, I didn't like it. I'm going to go back.
Wow.
One.
That surprises me.
It surprises me there's one.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, David, I want to be respectful of time, but thank you so much for your friendship and being in my life. Katie and Andre and myself and Sari, I just loved meeting you when we were out in Vegas. And man, you're a good guy out there doing God's work. So I really am humbled to have you in my life. And thank you so much for what you do for their industry and who you are as a person. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate it too. And I love the opportunity to come and share my ideas with you and whoever is going to be listening to us. And I know what you guys can do out there for our dental clients, because I'm not that person that does what you do, and I rely on you guys to be able to provide that for my clients.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Well, that was your Bite of Dental Marketing with David Goodman.
All right. Thanks, Eric.